Hey everybody, this is Darren Van Dam, and you are watching Flick Connection, the show that helps you get more out of movies, and today we're going to be talking about 10 chilling movies you have probably missed. So unlike usual here on Flick Connection, this list does not focus on a specific streaming service like Netflix, Prime Video, or HBO Max. Instead, I just found 10 really great movies I wanted to talk about that I know a lot of you have probably never seen. And after creating the video, I'll list in the top pinned comment where you can currently catch these movies, but availability will shift around over time, but all of these movies are well worth hunting down, even the one all the way at the back of my number 10 pick, Byzantium. Now this is easily one of the most overlooked vampire movies to have come out technically in the past decade. This movie is precisely 10 years old, but in this movie, Saoirse Ronan and Gemma Anderson play vampires. Now, as you can tell, this movie has a beautiful look to it. The cinematography is incredible. While this is not an overly bloody movie, it can be pretty graphic at times, but even those scenes are shot really well. They've got a stunning style to them. And then story-wise, while the story itself and the plot is a little bit thin, there's a lot of depth behind the characters, why they're vampires, why they're doing what they're doing. So it's ultimately a very good drama about these two characters. I guess we can call them sisters for the sake of this review. But if you enjoy vampire movies of any kind, or if it's been a long time since you've seen a good one, Byzantium is a really safe bet, even though it's all the way back at number 10. Now for a chilling revenge drama, Dead Man's Shoes is incredibly dark, even for a really low budget movie, and that's kind of what makes it feel so gritty and raw. You may recognize Paddy Considine, he plays the main character here, but he actually also wrote this movie, and in it he plays a man on the warpath. This is just a good classic revenge story, but again, it's shot in this really raw, simplistic style, and it makes it feel very real. It's also got some pretty clever scenes in terms of revenge movies, but not only does it feel really gritty and raw and real, it also deals with some pretty heavy subject matter, so tread lightly with Dead Man's Shoes. And then one that's done in a similar vein, it ultimately becomes a revenge movie, but it's way darker, grimmer, grittier, bloodier than Dead Man's Shoes, even though that one is pretty heavy, and that is Red, White, and Blue. Again, some of you may recognize Noah Taylor. He's been a long-time character actor. He's in a ton of stuff. He's a really great actor. You rarely see him in a lead role. Not only is that rare, it's very rare to see him, or anyone for that matter, play a character like this one. Now this is kind of an artsy indie film, and it does take quite a while getting in. Most of it is about this relationship developing between his character and this younger woman that may or may not really be inappropriate. That's not really where this movie is headed, but it ultimately turns into a very, very dark revenge story that is really well executed. It just takes quite a while getting there, but if I've interested you, this is a very good movie to watch. However, if you're a little bit apprehensive, I can tell you now, this one's dark enough that you may want to skip. But we'll lighten things up a little bit. I mean, this is a list of chilling movies, but KUMIKO, the Treasure Hunter, is a big change of pace. Now, in this movie, a young woman from Japan finds a tape of the movie Fargo. Yes, the Fargo. And she believes it to be so real that the treasure must exist out there in Fargo somewhere, and she goes on this international hunt to find the missing treasure from the movie Fargo. If that doesn't interest you enough, it's got stunning cinematography, better than even Byzantium, easily some of the best cinematography on this list. It really is a beautiful movie, but it's very slow paced. It is an art film. If that's not your bag, I do recommend this to Fargo fans because it's such an interesting little thing to kind of work as a companion to that movie, because it does reference the movie quite a bit in a very, very interesting way. So it's great for those folks as well. However, if you like stuff a little bit more fast-paced, I've got other picks on here for you. BELLFLOWER is a really beautiful movie that was done for almost no money, and even though you can kind of tell, I still think it's going to be worth watching for a lot of you.
Who are you? Where are you from? What do you do?
Now, despite what it looks like, this is not a Mad Max type of a movie. This is very much a movie about relationships. It's a movie about masculinity, the dangers of certain types of masculinity, and do not let that turn you off. Don't think this is a movie about toxic masculinity. It's going to be all woke and whatnot. Not the case. This actually has a very interesting take that I think a lot of men, particularly younger men, 20s, early 30s, I think you're going to identify with a lot of the themes here in ways that might surprise you. Not to say women won't as well, but I can say for a fact that a lot of men are going to be able to identify with this movie. So if you can get past some of the low budget restraints, there's a lot to love with Bellflower. And then my next pick has one of the strongest casts on this list, with Michael C. Hall from Dexter, Sam Shepard, and Don Johnson, all in a thriller that takes place in Texas in the 1980s, Cold in July. Now, this movie is actually from a horror movie director. This guy also did Stakeland, which is an amazing vampire movie, and Mulberry Street. Two movies I've talked about at length on this channel, but Cold in July is a good classic thriller. The 80s time period works really well. There's a great score that's got this synth wave thing that works really well for this story. Don Johnson plays a wild man in this movie. I really enjoyed his character a lot. And then the story itself goes in so many different directions. It gets quite complicated. Not too complicated to follow, but complicated in terms of the lives it's affecting in the movie. It's really great stuff and has a lot more going on than indie movies at this level typically do. If it's been a while since you've seen a good, solid, classic thriller, Cold in July is going to be the ticket for you. Now, in case you didn't feel time was passing by too fast already, it's almost been 10 years, almost a full decade, since Paul Walker died. Now, while he wasn't my favorite actor, I did like a lot of the projects he was working on. One of my absolute favorites, if not my favorite though, is Running Scared. Now, this is kind of a basic gangster movie at its core. It's got a very simple story. It's kind of a run all night type of a thing. He's trying to get a gun before the bad guys find it. And it all gets very complicated, and there's all kinds of crazy characters that come in and out of it. But above all that, there's an amazing sense of style with Running Scared. It's too much, it's too on the nose at times to be like in a really quote-unquote good movie, like award-winning type of a movie. But I find it all really interesting. But even though it's on the nose and a little silly and over the top at times, it adds this real depth of flavor to Running Scared that you don't normally get in these types of movies. These fast-paced, sort of midnight movies. There's a lot more to love with this than you typically get in the genre. If you typically are a fan of Darren Van Dam recommendations, I can tell you for a fact this is a top-tier Darren Van Dam rec. But speaking of actors who are not really around or not on the scene anymore, Val Kilmer, I know he just had a documentary come out this past year, but it's been a long time since he's been in movies and a really long time since he's been in good movies. But one that he did late in his career that is just criminally overlooked is The Salton Sea. Now, in this movie, he plays a drug addict, and he does a great job. This movie's got a lot of really interesting layers and a beautiful look to it for a movie about drug addicts. But not only is he great, you also get an amazing, and one of my favorite roles from Vincent D'Onofrio. He plays an absolute maniac in this movie, which he's done before in other movies. It really stands out here, and I loved his character in this movie. It's one of my favorites of his. It's fun stuff. That's all I'm going to say. If you've ever been a fan of Vincent D'Onofrio's or Val Kilmer's, The Salton Sea is going to be a must-watch for you. People who have been subscribed to the channel for a long time know that Goodfellas is my favorite movie, Martin Scorsese being my favorite director. Another one of my favorite Martin Scorsese movies, though, is The Departed, but I bet a lot of you didn't know that it is a remake of a Chinese film called Infernal Affairs. And it's a pretty true remake as well. It follows the story quite closely, meaning Infernal Affairs is almost as good as The Departed. While it maybe gets some points for being the original, it does not have Jack Nicholson in it and was not directed by Martin Scorsese, so therefore it loses. However, it is still a great movie. If you're a fan of The Departed, it's really interesting to see it as a Chinese movie because it's very, very close to the same. There's a lot of the same scenes, and there's some differences, but you can see how this story manages to work across multiple languages, and it's great stuff. It's got a different flavor, it's got a different style, yet it's the same core story. It's fantastic stuff. If you've never seen it, they actually went on and made sequels to this because it was so popular in China, but the original, again, it's almost as good as The Departed. And then I'll actually wrap this list up with my number 1 pick, which is another gangster movie, but this time it comes from Russia, or rather it's an American movie that takes place in Russia. Eastern Promises. Now, in this movie, Viggo Mortensen plays a Russian gangster, and he absolutely kills it. If you had not seen this man in so many other movies over the years, you would have swore up and down that he is legitimately a Russian gangster. You also get a fantastic role from Vincent Cassel and Naomi Watts. But this movie's actually directed by David Cronenberg, who is more famous for his really weird body horror style movies. And Eastern Promises is not only his most straightforward movie, his least weird movie, I think it's also his best. Now, I know some of you will consider that to be blasphemy because you'll say Videodrome or Scanners or Naked Lunch is his best movie. I'm kind of partial to Existenz in terms of his body horror stuff, but Eastern Promises was made late in his career. It was after A History of Violence, which also had some weird elements in it, but it was another Viggo Mortensen gangster movie. He did Eastern Promises after that, and I think his skills at this point in his career were so honed. Eastern Promises is just a really tight, solid gangster flick. It's got some great thriller elements. The story is really rich and layered, more so than you typically get with gangster movies. I'll put Goodfellas in that mix. There's hardly any story in Goodfellas. Eastern Promises has got a killer story. It can be bloody at times and a little too bloody at times, but if that's your bag, I'm telling you, Eastern Promises is top tier stuff. That is the list. Let me know if there's any additional recommendations I should keep my eyes out for. Who knows, one of your recommendations might make it onto a future video. Do not forget, all of these movies are listed in the top pinned comment. If they're available on streaming services, I'll be sure to let you know where as well, but that availability will change with time, so make sure you're subscribed and have the bell notification clicked. And if you want more recommendations, you can always go to DarrenVanDam.com for plenty of up-to-date movie recommendations. But I will keep making these videos as long as you keep watching them. Thanks for checking out this episode, and you will see me on the next one.